I like to say my brother and I are pretty good with animals. I'm good with cats and dogs, and my brother is pretty much good with everything. However, my dad is not so fortunate when it comes to him and animals. Well, not all the time. You may be sitting there watching this video thinking, how bad could it possibly be? Trust me.
You don't want to know.
But I'm going to tell you anyway. My dad has encountered a lot of different animals in many different areas he's lived in. Wild boars, condors, a lion, and dogs. You know, the normal stuff. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Let's start off with the wild boars. Since most of you don't know, my dad used to be a semi-professional cyclist who participated in bike races. He won every single race he entered except for 4, when he was in the 8th to 12th year old category. Other stories for other videos. These stories take place during that time and when he was a teenager. One day, my dad was out riding his bike and decided to go up a 21-mile long hill. While he was almost to the top of the hill, he came around a corner, and there standing in front of him was a sounder or a group of wild boar. A mother boar and its piglets. My dad stopped and froze in fear and wanted to turn around to ride down the hill so he could escape them. But he gave it a second thought, realizing that the mother boar would get to him before he could even turn around. So he just stood still and had to stare down with the mother boar until the dozen were all off the road. Once they were off, he sighed with relief, knowing he was out of danger. This next story also takes place during one of my dad's bike rides. How much does this man need to ride his bike? I get he's a cyclist, but come on, it clearly brings bad luck. And you're probably right, but those are stories for another time. Moving on, in this particular bike ride, my father was going up another long hill.
He didn't learn his lesson the first time.
He was almost at the top of this mountain and noticed a humongous California condor with a 12-foot wingspan perched on the top of a picnic table off the side of the road. Keep in mind, this takes place in Mexico, and California condors are very rare there, not to mention one with a 12-foot wingspan. Anyway, the big beastly buzzard, upon seeing my dad swerving because he was so tired, must have thought my dad was about to fall over dead, so he took off in flight and a minute later was flying circles over him and was slowly descending towards him. For those of you out there who are too lazy to use Google, a condor is basically a large vulture, and like vultures, they're scavengers, which means they eat dead animals. At least they're supposed to. Luckily for my dad, he came into some dense tree cover as the condor was getting closer. The condor couldn't possibly follow him, and luckily for him it worked, because, you know, if it didn't, he might not be alive, and that means I wouldn't be alive, and that means you wouldn't be watching this video right now. You know what? Never mind. Now I bet you viewers and commenters are wondering about the lion that was mentioned earlier. This other story involves my dad's friend, who we'll call Yaquino, who actually had a pet lion. One day, my dad decided to visit Yaquino at his house, and while he was there, Yaquino brought out his pet lion so my dad and Nick could get acquainted. But when Yaquino brought it out, it turned out to be a teenage lion. When my dad saw this, he was scared and cautious to not be close to it. Yaquino offered my dad to pet the lion, but my dad decided to remain cautious and not take any chances. This decision was a good one because the lion had already scratched her owner on different occasions and she liked to bite as well. But the most traumatizing animal memories that my dad has mostly involves dogs. My dad hasn't had the best luck with dogs. They would either scare him, be scared, or get injured because of him. Nowadays, most dogs start off scared of him due to how scary he looks to them. Well, unless they get used to him. But the most traumatic of these is when he owned dogs of his own. When my dad was young, he had a dog, and I'm not sure what his name was, so we'll call him Loss. One day, my dad was getting ready for a normal day at school, not knowing what was about to happen later that day. Once school had ended and my dad had returned home, he realized Loss was missing. My dad and his family were searching for Loss for days, but never found him. And now he's probably in dog heaven after being lost for such a long time. Or he found a new owner, who knows, I sure don't. This last story involves my dad getting chased by dogs. He and his sister got lost while hiking for hours, and around 10:30 p.m., they had ended up by some huge private mansions in the hills. All he remembers is running downhill as fast as he could and getting passed by his sister and the 2 dogs nipping at his heels. Anyway, remember everyone, if you want to play tag with dogs, just get lost. Wait, that's a terrible message for the kids. Anyway, always remember to stay out of trouble, and always know that I'm a terrible animator without a team. Okay, who's writing this script? Whatever, that's the video guys.